Well, howdy, friends. Awful good to see you. It was a heck of a summer. How's it treating you and your family? I'm hoping you're all doing well. Are you here for camaraderie and stories around the campfire? Well, if you are, then fill your mug with something good to drink and find a place around the fire. I've got another story about Forest Ranger Liz. You remember her? Well, she's the ranger that had drawn the attention of that young male squatch. Heaped flowers on her parked car, and it freaked her out enough to ask for a reassignment within the forest district. Well, she was moved miles away and was lucky when by chance the beast and she crossed paths again, undoubtedly saving her life. Well, you can find those stories and others here on the Hidden Corners podcast. Well, so old Liz is just working her way through the summer. Remember, her job is sort of a supervisory position where she travels her end of the district and inspects facilities and tourist sites. She's always looking for something that needs repair, and she'll write up a report, and then someone else goes to repair it eventually. She really cares about the forest, and she really cares about her job. She thinks it's important for the tourists to have a good experience, you know. The forest belongs to all of us, and she's just working there so that we could enjoy it. And she realizes that. So she stays on top of things. Liz really goes the extra mile for the Forest Service. She's just a good employee to have. Well, the summer brings the tourists and the traffic, and the whole forest is alive with the plants and animals, and their busiest time of the year. With all that, we also have summer thunderstorms and wildfires. Wildfires are one of the most destructive things that can happen in these woods. So it was on a Tuesday evening in August, during an especially active thunderstorm with many lightning strikes. Quite a few small fires were started because of those strikes. And because they're out towards the wilderness area within the park, there were no roads within a couple miles of the fires. So the fires would have to be fought, by hot shots. These are hand crews that are mobilized via helicopter or even sometimes they'll parachute in. These men and women are often the first ones on the fire line, and sometimes the only ones there. With help from airborne assets like helicopters and fixed-wing airplanes that drop retardant and they drop water. And, of course, the hand crews, and they build a line that the fire will not cross, and eventually it would die off. So at the very least, they're slowing the fire growth down in the early parts of the fire, which are important. And these men and women are really invaluable. Well, Liz could hear the chatter on the Forest Service radio in her pickup. It might be several hours and maybe not until tomorrow morning before the weather was such that the helicopters could fly the hot shots into the fire zone. Well, she knew the fires were several miles from most of the tourist facilities, but there were a few remote pit toilet buildings near the trailheads, parking lots and trailheads, at the end of her district. Now, she knew that it would be best to lower the steel fire curtains on those bathrooms. If nothing else, it'll keep the ashes and the embers out of the inside of the bathrooms. Even if the building burns down, you just can't do much about that. Well, just in case, it's best to lower those curtains. She also knew that if she wanted it done, that she'd have to do it herself. But by the time that she made a report and made its way through the normal channels, it could be 2 days. Besides, Wednesday and Thursday were normal days off, and she didn't want to go back to the office this afternoon. She'd just go out and lower the curtains herself, then she'd write a report when she got back on Friday. Piece of cake, right? Well, how many times have we said that, then things turn south? Well, she sat herself up for the real trouble because she didn't tell anyone where she was going. She pulled into the parking lot at the trailhead where the toilets were, then lowered the fire curtains into place with no problems. Then she thought, she'd walk out that trail about a quarter mile to a clear area, there was no trees in there, where she could look across the valley and see the mountain where the fires were. kind of give her a better idea what's going on. Once again, without telling anyone where she was headed off to, she went. The view was fantastic from the clearing, and she could see a lot of the mountain from where she was, and if she were just to go down the slope a little bit, maybe 100 foot or so, she'd be able to see around the trees that were in the way where the trail was crossed through the clearing. So she worked her way down the slope carefully, right? Because it was wet and it was mossy. It was on a hard rock face, and that's why there were no trees there. It's a rock outcropping, and it was where water was coming out, springing out, and so it was covered with moss and slick. Well, just as she reached out with her foot for a solid foothold, she's taking 1 foot at a time, two things happened at the same time. A grouse exploded seemingly out of the ground itself, just a few feet in front of her, and she lost her footing all at the same time. She smacked that rock face hard right behind the ear. She slipped and fell out, and she was instantly knocked out cold. She'd really got herself in a pickle this time. It seemed like forever to Liz. No memory of what had happened. Sort of like starting over. She slowly became aware as she woke up, groggy and sore all over. She wasn't sure where she was. It seemed like she was on her back in a dark cave. She sure didn't know how she got there, and really didn't know where she was, so it was just, yeah, she tried to move, but everything hurt too much. She gave in to the pain, and everything went black. Out she went. It was about 5 hours later, about 10 in the morning, and she woke up again. She was confused, but she had a little more awareness. Everything hurt. Her head, her shoulder, her back, all where she had slipped and fell against that rock slope. Well, the morning light was filtering in the cave, and it made it no doubt that she was in a cave. She saw enough around her. She felt comfortable, too. Too comfortable for the rock and the dirt floor. Well, that's because she was laying on a carefully built bed of pine boughs, thickly covered with moss. She managed to sit up, and she nearly passed out again. But she fought through it till things became clear, and she was able to focus her eyes, looking around. She was in a room-sized cave, almost 20 foot square, and the opening was around a corner where the light came from. Now, on a crudely split log laying right next to her was a gourd filled with clean water and a mat of moss covered with service berries and currants. Well, when she sat up, a primitive bandage fell from her head, and it was a mass of moss saturated with what looked like pulverized arnica flowers. So arnica, it's in the sunflower family, and it has healing powers. The poultice had helped her scalp to heal and kept the infection at bay. Now, who had brought her here and bandaged her head? Who had built the bed she lay on? Where was she? She was pretty confused, but aware that she must get to her truck and get to a doctor. Eating some berries and drinking deeply from the gourd was helping her to feel better. She felt strong enough to stand and try to walk. It took a while, but even with a splitting headache and a sore body, she made it to the cave mouth, and it appeared to be on a slope, similar to where she fell. It was fairly steep, and in fact, she was only about a mile upslope from where she went down. She didn't know that at the time, but she still didn't know where she was, but she stepped out onto the slope away from the cave mouth and looked around to get her bearings. As she was studying her surroundings, she saw what looked like a flower on the forest floor, about 50 feet away. It was a yellow flower with a yellow center, an arnica, like the poultice was made of. Well, she slowly walked to it, and as she got a few feet away, she saw that it had been placed there. It wasn't growing there. It had been pulled or cut, and it was laying on the floor, on the dirt. And looking beyond it is what appeared to be another one about 50 foot or so away, in the same direction, down and to the left through the trees, sort of like at a 45-degree angle, downhill and then side hill, kind of midway. Well, she followed this same pattern of flowers placed in a line that led her almost a mile down the mountain. slowly and taking great caution not to fall again, until she sighted what looked to be a building ahead through the trees. In fact, it was the bathroom where she started yesterday. All of a sudden, overcome with emotions, Liz began to shake and cry. She stopped for a couple minutes and just let herself go. She couldn't see to walk, so she stood where she was, and she just shook. Regaining her composure, she wiped her eyes and made the last couple 100 feet to her pickup truck. Because she'd told no one of her intentions when she left work yesterday, and it being her day off, she wasn't missed. The fire on this edge of the park had kept visitors from coming this way to use the trailhead. And the service had also, in fact, thrown up barricades in the road at the bottom of the hill about 2.5 miles back down the road to discourage tourists from coming up this way. So no one had seen the Forest Service truck in the parking lot and made an inquiry on why it was there. Liz had sort of kidnapped herself. Well, she got the truck going and made it by the barricades and into town to the Medi-Center. And they were able to get her right in, and it was determined she had a concussion. It took 10 stitches to close the wound, and they took an x-ray to look for clotting, which there was none. So they recommended bed rest and sent her away with a couple of prescriptions. She went home, and she decided she'd wait till tomorrow to call her boss and try to explain everything. Hell, she needed that time to try to figure out what really happened anyway. She remembered the fall, then waking up in the cave, and following the trail of arnicas back to the parking lot. She remembered how overwhelming it was to see something so familiar and safe as her truck. She remembered seeing the fire shutters down on the toilets and the sign for the loop trail in the parking lot. What she hadn't seen was the tall, hairy beast standing just back in the tree line as she drove slowly out of the lot. In fact, she'd been so intent with following the trail of yellow flowers that she hadn't seen him follow her from the cave to the trailhead. Now, Liz was lucky. Someone or something was there to help her when she fell, and she'd got herself into a corner by not telling anyone where she was headed. Not smart, folks. Well, do you think she has any idea what it was that rescued her and possibly saved her life? Again. Do you think she'll remember? Poor Liz. Seems like she's got to figure this out eventually. One thing's for sure, where possible, have a contingency plan. You'd have too many people that'd miss you. Well, I'm heading off now. It's been a good evening around this campfire. You're a good group. Until the next time, this is Clay Steele. Be good to people.